The town of Philippi, West Virginia, in 1980 was the kind of place where crime blotters were typically filled with petty thefts and the occasional bar fight. It was a community woven together by family ties, church suppers, and the quiet rhythm of Appalachian life. The Barbour County Courthouse, a historic building famed for being the site of the first land battle of the American Civil War, stood as a stately, silent witness to a century of the town's comings and goings. Its most intriguing architectural feature was a gap beneath the main courtroom floor, an access point for repairs, known to locals as the Whispering Gallery for its odd acoustic properties. It was a quaint oddity, not a place one would associate with a dark secret. But in the spring of that year, a secret began to fester in that very space, one that would take 12 long years to uncover, tearing apart the illusion of small-town safety and exposing a rot at the heart of a trusted institution. This is the story of the murder of Doris Bevins, a crime solved not by a dramatic confession or a high-tech breakthrough, but by a stubborn whisper from the past, trapped under the floorboards of justice itself. Doris Dottie Bevins was a 43-year-old mother of three, described by those who knew her as kind-hearted, hard-working, and deeply religious. She worked as a housekeeper and caretaker, often for elderly residents in the community. Her life, however, was not without its struggles. She was in the process of a difficult divorce from her husband, Delbert, and the emotional and financial strain was palpable. On the morning of May 9, 1980, Dottie told her family she had an appointment at the Barbour County Courthouse. The purpose of the visit was mundane, related to the ongoing divorce proceedings. She was seen that morning, a petite woman with a determined stride, entering the imposing brick building. Then, she vanished. When Dottie failed to return home that evening, her family grew worried. This was utterly out of character. Her children, particularly her daughter, knew their mother would never leave without a word. The worry quickly spiraled into panic. The family contacted the police, and the Philippi Police Department, a small force more accustomed to handling traffic violations, began a missing person investigation. The initial assumption was that Dottie, stressed by her marital problems, might have taken some time away. But as hours turned into days, this theory collapsed. Her car was found parked near the courthouse, untouched. Her purse, containing her identification and money, was still in it. There was no activity on her bank accounts. It was as if she had been plucked from the face of the earth the moment she stepped out of the courthouse. The investigation, led by then Chief of Police James "Jim" Smith, was immediate but, in hindsight, deeply flawed. They interviewed courthouse employees, including a soft-spoken, well-liked janitor named Zeke White. White was a familiar figure around town, a man who kept to himself, known for his efficiency and quiet demeanor. He told police he had seen Doris Bevins leave the courthouse that day, walking down the steps and away into the town. His statement was accepted without serious question. With no body, no crime scene, and no obvious suspects, the case grew cold. Doris Bevins was filed away as a missing person, a tragic mystery that haunted her family. For the Bevins family, the years following Dottie's disappearance were a special kind of hell. Without a body, there was no closure. They lived in a suspended state of grief and hope, a torturous combination where every phone ring could bring news of her discovery, alive or dead. Her children grew into adulthood shadowed by the unanswered question of their mother's fate. Over time, suspicion began to crystallize around one man, Zeke White. The whispers started because his story was the last confirmed account of Doris. But there were other, more troubling reasons. As people looked back, they recalled that Zeke White had been unusually attentive to Doris in the weeks before her disappearance. He had done some handyman work for her, and some neighbors thought his interest seemed to go beyond mere friendliness. He was known to have a temper, a fact he carefully concealed behind his quiet facade. Most compellingly, Zeke White had an alibi that began to crack under scrutiny. He claimed that after work on the day Doris vanished, he had gone to a local store to purchase groceries. But the store's owner, when pressed years later, had a vague but nagging memory that White had come in on a different day. It was a small discrepancy, but in a case with no other leads, it loomed large. The family's suspicion turned into a quiet campaign. They would drive past White's house, watching him. They pleaded with law enforcement to take another look. But Chief Jim Smith, who had since become the Barbour County Sheriff, remained unconvinced. He saw no physical evidence, no motive strong enough to pursue White aggressively. To the family, it felt like a wall of institutional indifference. They believed that Zeke White, a man who worked within the very system of justice, was being protected by a system unwilling to admit it might have gotten it wrong from the start. The case seemed destined to remain a cold, painful file in a cabinet, until a change in leadership brought a new pair of eyes. In 1992, John R. Bob Stacey was elected as the new sheriff of Barbour County. Sheriff Stacey was a different kind of lawman. He was younger, more methodical, and believed in the power of re-examining old cases with modern techniques and a fresh perspective. The Bevins case was one of the first files he pulled. Stacey was struck by the family's unwavering conviction that Zeke White was involved. He was also troubled by the original investigation's lack of depth. He assigned one of his most persistent detectives, Steve Revell, to the case. Revell didn't see a cold case, he saw a puzzle with missing pieces. He began by re-interviewing everyone, from the family to the original investigators. He quickly identified the central weakness, Zeke White's alibi. Revell tracked down the store owner again, who now, with the distance of years, was more certain that White's grocery shopping memory was misplaced. More importantly, Revell learned something that had been overlooked for a decade. Zeke White had a master key to the entire Barbour County Courthouse. This simple fact opened up a terrifying possibility. What if Doris Bevins never left the courthouse alive? What if her appointment had concluded, and she had encountered Zeke White inside the building? The courthouse was a public space by day, but after 4:30 p.m., it became a vast, empty, and echoing structure. It was the perfect place to commit a crime without witnesses. The theory was compelling, but it had one gigantic flaw. If a murder had occurred inside the courthouse, where was the body? The building had been searched, albeit not with the fine-tooth comb a homicide would warrant. How could one man hide a body so completely that it would never be found, not even by accident, for 12 years? The idea seemed ludicrous. Yet, it was the only theory that explained the complete lack of a trace. Detective Revell decided to treat the courthouse itself as a crime scene. He obtained a search warrant, an unprecedented move for a missing person case that was over a decade old. In the summer of 1992, a team of investigators descended upon the historic building. They focused on areas that were secluded, rarely accessed, and within Zeke White's domain as the janitor. Their attention was drawn to the Whispering Gallery, the crawlspace beneath the main courtroom. It was a dark, dank, and cramped area, filled with decades of dust, discarded paperwork, and the detritus of a century-old building. Access was through a small, discreet door that was kept locked. Zeke White had the key. The investigators, armed with flashlights and clad in protective suits, crawled into the oppressive space. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and old wood. They sifted through the rubble methodically, their lights cutting through the gloom. Then, one of the searchers saw something that didn't belong. It wasn't a body, it was a clue more chilling than they could have imagined. Protruding from the dirt and debris was the corner of a faded, blue, plastic-covered booklet. Carefully, they extracted it. It was a passport, and when they wiped away the grime, the photograph of a woman stared back at them. It was Doris Bevins. The discovery sent a shockwave through the investigation. A passport was not an item one misplaces. It was a vital document, kept secure. Its presence in the most hidden part of the courthouse, a place only a custodian like Zeke White would frequent, was devastating evidence. It placed Doris Bevins, or at least her possessions, inside the courthouse after her alleged departure. It directly contradicted White's story and confirmed the investigators' darkest theory. The crawlspace was now the epicenter of the search. With renewed intensity, the team began a meticulous excavation of the dirt floor. Hours turned into a day, and then another. The tension was unbearable. Then, on June 25, 1992, a shovel struck something more solid than rock. Carefully, painstakingly, they brushed away the soil. They uncovered a human skull. Then a skeleton, largely intact, still clothed in the faded remnants of a dress. Dental records would later provide the definitive identification, but everyone there knew. After 12 years of waiting, of wondering, of agonizing, Doris Bevins had been found. She had been lying in a shallow grave, 30 feet below the very courtroom where justice was supposed to be served, all along. With the discovery of the body, Zeke White was immediately the prime and only suspect. He was arrested without incident at his home. The quiet janitor, now an old man, seemed to shrink under the weight of the accusation. Confronted with the irrefutable evidence, the passport placed in the crawlspace, his master key, the shattered alibi, his carefully constructed facade crumbled. After hours of interrogation, Zeke White confessed. His story was one of pathetic brutality and shocking opportunity. He admitted that on the afternoon of May 9, 1980, he had approached Doris Bevins inside the courthouse. He had made an advance, which she rejected. Enraged by the rejection, and perhaps fueled by a sense of entitlement that had festered for years, he attacked her. The altercation turned violent, and in a fit of rage, he strangled her to death. Panicked, he realized he had committed a murder in the heart of the town's seat of justice. But his unique position also provided him with a macabre solution. He knew the courthouse better than anyone. He knew its secrets, its hidden passages, and its forgotten spaces. As the building emptied for the night, he dragged Doris Bevins's body to the crawlspace access door. He carried her down into the darkness and, using tools from his janitorial cart, dug a shallow grave in the dirt floor. He buried her, along with her purse, which he later retrieved to remove the passport, perhaps as a sick trophy or simply to delay identification if the body was ever found. He then cleaned up, went home, and the next day, calmly told the police he saw her leave. His motive was as old as crime itself, a twisted mix of rejected desire and violent pride. The sheer audacity of the hiding place was his greatest shield. It was a place so obvious in its connection to him, yet so unthinkable as a gravesite, that it allowed him to evade justice for over a decade. Murder. In 1993, he stood trial in the very courthouse under which he had hidden his victim. The irony was palpable and painful for the Bevins family, who finally had their day in court. Facing overwhelming evidence, including his own confession, White changed his plea to guilty mid-trial, likely to avoid a harsher sentence. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There was no victory dance for the Bevins family, only a profound and weary sense of relief. The whisper on the floor had finally been heard. Doris Bevins was given a proper Christian burial, a dignity denied to her for 12 years. The case left deep scars on the town of Philippi. It shattered the myth of the harmless, quiet neighbor, revealing a predator who had operated in plain sight. It also raised uncomfortable questions about the original investigation. Why had Chief Smith been so quick to accept White's story? Was it incompetence, or a reluctance to suspect one of their own? The answers to those questions remain a matter of local debate. For the family, the resolution was bittersweet. They had their mother back, but they had lost 12 years of peace. The memory of Doris Bevins is no longer defined by her disappearance, but by the relentless love of her children who never gave up on her. The Barbour County Courthouse still stands, a historic monument with a dark chapter forever etched into its foundation, a permanent reminder that sometimes, the truth is hidden in the last place you would ever think to look, waiting silently for someone who is willing to listen.